Uncle Tom's Cabin or Life Among the Lowly. Chapter 7. The Mother's Struggle. It is impossible to conceive of a human creature more wholly desolate and forlorn than Eliza, when she turned her footsteps from Uncle Tom's Cabin. Her husband's suffering and dangers, and the danger of her child, all blended in her mind, with a confused and stunning sense of the risk she was running, in leaving the only home she had ever known, and cutting loose from the protection of a friend whom she loved and revered. Then there was the parting from every familiar object, the place where she had grown up, the trees under which she had played, the groves where she had walked many an evening in happier days, by the side of her young husband. Everything, as it lay in the clear, frosty starlight, seemed to speak reproachfully to her, and ask her whither could she go from a home like that. But stronger than all was maternal love, wrought into a paroxysm of frenzy by the near approach of a fearful danger. Her boy was old enough to have walked by her side, and, in an indifferent case, she would only have led him by the hand, but now the bare thought of putting him out of her arms made her shudder, and she strained him to her bosom with a convulsive grasp, as she went rapidly forward. The frosty ground creaked beneath her feet, and she trembled at the sound. Every quaking leaf and fluttering shadow sent the blood backward to her heart, and quickened her footsteps. She wondered within herself at the strength that seemed to be come upon her, for she felt the weight of her boy as if it had been a feather, and every flutter of fear seemed to increase the supernatural power that bore her on, while from her pale lips burst forth, in frequent ejaculations, the prayer to a friend above: Lord, help! Lord, save me! If it were your Harry, mother, or your Willie, that were going to be torn from you by a brutal traitor, tomorrow morning, if you had seen the man, and heard that the papers were signed and delivered, and you had only from 12 o'clock till morning to make good your escape, how fast could you walk? How many miles could you make in those few brief hours, with the darling at your bosom, the little sleepy head on your shoulder, the small, soft arms trustingly holding onto your neck? For the child slept. At first, the novelty and alarm kept him waking, but his mother so hurriedly repressed every breath or sound, and so assured him that if he were only still she would certainly save him, that he clung quietly round her neck, only asking, as he found himself sinking to sleep: "Mother, I don't need to keep awake, do I?" "No, my darling, sleep, if you want to." "But, mother, if I do get asleep, you won't let him get me?" "No, so may God help me," said his mother, with a paler cheek, and a brighter light in her large dark eyes. "You're sure, ain't you, mother?" "Yes, sure," said the mother, in a voice that startled herself, for it seemed to her to come from a spirit within, that was no part of her, and the boy dropped his little weary head on her shoulder, and was soon asleep. How the touch of those warm arms, the gentle breathings that came in her neck, seemed to add fire and spirit to her movements. It seemed to her as if strength poured into her in electric streams, from every gentle touch and movement of the sleeping, confiding child. Sublime is the dominion of the mind over the body, that, for a time, can make flesh and nerve impregnable, and string the sinews like steel, so that the weak become so mighty. The boundaries of the farm, the grove, the wood lot, passed by her dizzily, as she walked on, and still she went, leaving one familiar object after another, slacking not, pausing not, till reddening daylight found her many a long mile from all traces of any familiar objects upon the open highway. She had often been, with her mistress, to visit some connections, in the little village of T, not far from the Ohio River, and knew the road well. To go thither, to escape across the Ohio River, were the first hurried outlines of her plan of escape. Beyond that, she could only hope in God. When horses and vehicles began to move along the highway, with that alert perception peculiar to a state of excitement, and which seems to be a sort of inspiration, she became aware that her headlong pace and distracted air might bring on her remark and suspicion. She therefore put the boy on the ground, and, adjusting her dress and bonnet, she walked on at as rapid a pace as she thought consistent with the preservation of appearances. In her little bundle she had provided a store of cakes and apples, which she used as expedients for quickening the speed of the child, rolling the apple some yards before them, when the boy would run with all his might after it, and this ruse, often repeated, carried them over many a half-mile. After a while, they came to a thick patch of woodland, through which murmured a clear brook. As the child complained of hunger and thirst, she climbed over the fence with him, and, sitting down behind a large rock which concealed them from the road, she gave him a breakfast out of her little package. The boy wondered and grieved that she could not eat, and when, putting his arms round her neck, he tried to wedge some of his cake into her mouth, it seemed to her that the rising in her throat would choke her. "No, no, Harry darling, mother can't eat till you are safe. We must go on until we come to the river." And she hurried again into the road, and again constrained herself to walk regularly and composedly forward. She was many miles past any neighborhood where she was personally known. If she should chance to meet any who knew her, she reflected that the well-known kindness of the family would be of itself a blind to suspicion, as making it an unlikely supposition that she could be a fugitive. As she was also so white as not to be known as of colored lineage, without a critical survey, and her child was white also, it was much easier for her to pass on unsuspected. On this presumption, she stopped at noon at a neat farmhouse, to rest herself, and buy some dinner for her child and self, for, as the danger decreased with the distance, the supernatural tension of the nervous system lessened, and she found herself both weary and hungry. The good woman, kindly and gossiping, seemed rather pleased than otherwise with having somebody come in to talk with, and accepted, without examination, Eliza's statement, that she was going on a little piece, to spend a week with her friends, all which she hoped in her heart might prove strictly true. An hour before sunset, she entered the village of T, by the Ohio River, weary and footsore, but still strong in heart. Her first glance was at the river, which lay, like Jordan, between her and the Canaan of Liberty on the other side. It was now early spring, and the river was swollen and turbulent, great cakes of floating ice were swinging heavily to and fro in the turbid waters. Owing to the peculiar form of the shore on the Kentucky side, the land bending far out into the water, the ice had been lodged and detained in great quantities, and the narrow channel which swept round the bend was full of ice, piled one cake over another, thus forming a temporary barrier to the descending ice, which lodged, and formed a great, undulating raft, filling up the whole river, and extending almost to the Kentucky shore. Eliza stood, for a moment, contemplating this unfavorable aspect of things, which she saw at once must prevent the usual ferry boat from running, and then turned into a small public house on the bank, to make a few inquiries. The hostess, who was busy in various fizzing and stewing operations over the fire, preparatory to the evening meal, stopped, with a fork in her hand, as Eliza's sweet and plaintive voice arrested her. "What is it?" she said. "Isn't there any ferry or boat, that takes people over to B, now?" she said. "No, indeed," said the woman, "the boats has stopped running." Eliza's look of dismay and disappointment struck the woman, and she said, inquiringly, "Maybe you're wanting to get over, anybody sick? Ya seem mighty anxious." "I've got a child that's very dangerous," said Eliza. "I never heard of it till last night, and I've walked quite a piece today, in hopes to get to the ferry." "Well, now, that's unlucky," said the woman, whose motherly sympathies were much aroused. "I'm really concerned for yet. Solomon," she called, from the window, towards a small back building. A man, in leather apron and very dirty hands, appeared at the door. "I say, Sol," said the woman, "is that our man going to tote them bar-ls over tonight?" "He said he should try, if tea was any way prudent," said the man. "There's a man apiece down here, that's going over with some truck this evening. If he dares to, he'll be in here to supper tonight, so you'd better set down and wait." "That's a sweet little fellow," added the woman, offering him a cake. But the child, wholly exhausted, cried with weariness. "Poor fellow, he isn't used to walking, and I've hurried him on so, said Eliza. Well, take him into this room, said the woman, opening into a small bedroom, where stood a comfortable bed. Eliza laid the weary boy upon it, and held his hands in hers till he was fast asleep. For her there was no rest. As a fire in her bones, the thought of the pursuer urged her on, and she gazed with longing eyes on the sullen, surging waters that lay between her and liberty. Here we must take our leave of her for the present, to follow the course of her pursuers. Though Mrs. Shelby had promised that the dinner should be hurried on table, yet it was soon seen, as the thing has often been seen before, that it required more than one to make a bargain. So, although the order was fairly given out in Haley's hearing, and carried to Aunt Chloe by at least half a dozen juvenile messengers, that dignitary only gave certain very gruff snorts, and tosses of her head, and went on with every operation in an unusually leisurely and circumstantial manner. For some singular reason, an impression seemed to reign among the servants generally that Mrs. would not be particularly disobliged by delay, and it was wonderful what a number of counter-accidents occurred constantly, to retard the course of things. One luckless wight contrived to upset the gravy, and then gravy had to be got up de novo, with due care and formality, Aunt Chloe watching and stirring with dogged precision, answering shortly, to all suggestions of haste, that she warn't going to have raw gravy on the table, to help nobody's catchings. One tumbled down with the water, and had to go to the spring for more, and another precipitated the butter into the path of events, and there was from time to time giggling news brought into the kitchen that Moss R. Haley was mighty oneasy, and that he couldn't sit in his cheer no ways, but was a walkin' and stalkin' to the winders and through the porch. "Sarves him right," said Aunt Chloe, indignantly. "He'll get wuss nor oneasy, one of these days, if he don't mend his ways. His master'll be sending for him, and then see how he'll look. He'll go to torment, and no mistake," said little Jake. "He desarves it," said Aunt Chloe, grimly. "He's broke a many, many hearts, I tell ye all," she said, stopping, with a fork uplifted in her hands. "It's like what Moss R. George reads in Revelation, souls a callin' under the altar, and a callin' on the Lord for vengeance on sich, and by the Lord he'll hear 'em, so he will." Aunt Chloe, who was much revered in the kitchen, was listened to with open mouth, and, the dinner being now fairly sent in, the whole kitchen was at leisure to gossip with her, and to listen to her remarks. "Sich'll be burnt up forever, and no mistake, won't there?" said Andy. "I'd be glad to see it, I'll be bound," said little Jake. "Cheel en," said a voice, that made them all start. It was Uncle Tom, who had come in, and stood listening to the conversation at the door. "Cheel en," he said, "I'm afeard you don't know what ye're sayin'. Forever is a drayful word, Cheel en, it's awful to think on t. You've tender wish that are to any human critter." "We wouldn't to anybody but the soul drivers," said Andy. "Nobody can help wishing it to them, they's so awful wicked." "Don't Natur herself kinder cry out on 'em," said Aunt Chloe. "Don't dey tear der suckin' baby right off his mother's breast, and sell him, and her little children as is crying and holding on by her clothes, don't dey pull 'em off and sells 'em? Don't dey tear wife and husband apart," said Aunt Chloe, beginning to cry, "when it's jest talking the very life on 'em, and all the while does they feel one bit, don't dey drink and smoke, and take it oncommon easy? Lor, if the devil don't get them, what's he good for?" And Aunt Chloe covered her face with her checked apron, and began to sob in good earnest. "Pray for them that spitefully use you, the good book says," says Tom. "Pray for 'em," said Aunt Chloe. "Lor, it's too tough. I can't pray for 'em." "It's Natur, Chloe, and Natur's strong," said Tom, "but the Lord's grace is stronger. Besides, you oughter think what an awful state a poor critter's soul is in that'll do them things. You oughter thank God that you ain't like him, Chloe. I'm sure I'd rather be sold, 10,000 times over, than to have all that poor critters got to answer for." "So d I, a heap," said Jake. Lor, shouldn't we catch it, Andy? Andy shrugged his shoulders, and gave an acquiescent whistle. I'm glad Moss R didn't go off this morning, as he looked to, said Tom, that AR hurt me more than Selin, it did. Maybe it might have been natural for him, but T would have come desp hard on me, as has known him from a baby, but I've seen Moss R, and I begin ter feel sort o reconciled to the Lord's will now. Moss R couldn't help hisself, he did right, but I'm feared things will be kinder goin' to rack, when I'm gone. Moss R can't be spected to be a pryin' round everywhere, as I've done, a keepin' up all the ends. The boys all means well, but they powerful carless. That AR troubles me. The bell here rang, and Tom was summoned to the parlor. Tom, said his master, kindly, I want you to notice that I give this gentleman bonds to forfeit $1,000 if you are not on the spot when he wants you. He's going today to look after his other business, and you can have the day to yourself. Go anywhere you like, boy. Thank you, Moss R, said Tom. And mind yourself, said the trader, and don't come it over your master with any o' your nigger tricks, for I'll take every cent out of him, if you ain't dar. If he'd hear to me, he wouldn't trust any on ye slippery as eels. Moss R, said Tom, and he stood very straight. I was just 8 years old when ol' missus put you into my arms, and you wasn't a year old. Dar, says she, Tom, that's to be your young Moss R, take good care on him, says she. And now I just ask you, Moss R, have I ever broke word to you, or gone contrary to you, specially since I was a Christian? Mr. Shelby was fairly overcome, and the tears rose to his eyes. My good boy, said he, the Lord knows you say but the truth, and if I was able to help it, all the world shouldn't buy you. And sure as I am a Christian woman, said Mrs. Shelby, you shall be redeemed as soon as I can any way bring together means. Sir, she said to Haley, take good account of who you sell him to, and let me know. Lor, yes, for that matter, said the trader, I may bring him up in a year, not much the wuss for wear, and trade him back. I'll trade with you then, and make it for your advantage, said Mrs. Shelby. Of course, said the trader, all equal with me, leave trade up as down, so I does a good business. All I want is a livin', you know, ma'am, that's all any on us wants, I suppose. Mr. and Mrs. Shelby both felt annoyed and degraded by the familiar impudence of the trader, and yet both saw the absolute necessity of putting a constraint on their feelings. The more hopelessly sordid and insensible he appeared, the greater became Mrs. Shelby's dread of his succeeding in recapturing Eliza and her child, and of course the greater her motive for detaining him by every female artifice. She therefore graciously smiled, assented, chatted familiarly, and did all she could to make time pass imperceptibly. At 2 o'clock Sam and Andy brought the horses up to the posts, apparently greatly refreshed and invigorated by the scamper of the morning. Sam was there new oiled from dinner, with an abundance of zealous and ready officiousness. As Haley approached, he was boasting, in flourishing style, to Andy, of the evident and eminent success of the operation, now that he had fairly come to it. Your master, I suppose, don't keep no dogs, said Haley, thoughtfully, as he prepared to mount. Heaps on 'em, said Sam, triumphantly, dar's Bruno he's a roarer, and, besides that, 'bout every nigger of us keeps a pup of some nature or other. Po, said Haley, and he said something else, too, with regard to the said dogs, at which Sam muttered. I don't see no use cussin' on 'em, no way. But your master don't keep no dogs, I pretty much know he don't, for trackin' out niggers. Sam knew exactly what he meant, but he kept on a look of earnest and desperate simplicity. Our dogs all smells round considerable sharp. I 'spect they's the kind, though they haunty never had no practice. They's far dogs, though, at most anything, if you'd get 'em started. Here, Bruno, he called, whistling to the lumbering Newfoundland, who came pitching tumultuously toward them. You go hang, said Haley, getting up. Come, tumble up now. Sam tumbled up accordingly, dexterously contriving to tickle Andy as he did so, which occasioned Andy to split out into a laugh, greatly to Haley's indignation, who made a cut at him with his riding whip. "I astonished at yer, Andy," said Sam, with awful gravity. "This yer's a serious business, Andy. Yer mustn't be a makin' game. This yer ain't no way to help Moss R. "I shall take the straight road to the river," said Haley, decidedly, after they had come to the boundaries of the estate. "I know the way of all of 'em. They makes tracks for the underground." "Sartin," said Sam, "that's de day. Moss R. Haley hits de thing right in de middle. Now, der's two roads to de river, de dirt road and der pike, which Moss R. mean to take." Andy looked up innocently at Sam, surprised at hearing this new geographical fact, but instantly confirmed what he said, by a vehement reiteration. "'Cause," said Sam, "I'd rather be 'clined to 'magine that Lizzie D take de dirt road, bane it's the least travelled." Haley, notwithstanding that he was a very old bird, and naturally inclined to be suspicious of chaff, was rather brought up by this view of the case. "If yer warn't both on yer such cussed liars, now," he said, contemplatively as he pondered a moment. The pensive, reflective tone in which this was spoken appeared to amuse Andy prodigiously, and he drew a little behind, and shook so as apparently to run a great risk of failing off his horse, while Sam's face was immovably composed into the most doleful gravity. "Course," said Sam, "Moss R. can do as he'd ruther, go de straight road. If Moss R. thinks best, it's all one to us. Now, when I study PON it, I think de straight road de best," deridedly. "She would naturally go a lonesome way," said Haley, thinking aloud, and not minding Sam's remark. "Dar ain't no sayin'," said Sam, "gals is peculiar, they never does nothin' ye thinks they will, mos gen lly the contrary. Gals is nat lly made contrary, and so, if you thinks they've gone one road, it is sartin you'd better go t' other, and then you'll be sure to find 'em. Now, my private 'pinion is, Lizzie took der road, so I think we'd better take de straight one." This profound generic view of the female sex did not seem to dispose Haley particularly to the straight road, and he announced decidedly that he should go the other, and ask Sam when they should come to it. "A little piece ahead," said Sam, giving a wink to Andy with the eye which was on Andy's side of the head, and he added, gravely, "But I've studied on de matter, and I'm quite clar we ought not to go dat ar way. I never been over it no way. It's to be lonesome, and we might lose our way where we'd come to, de Lord only knows." "Nevertheless," said Haley, "I shall go that way. Now I think I think I hearn 'em tell that dat ar road was all fenced up and down by der creek, and thar, ain't it, Andy?" Andy wasn't certain, he'd only hearn tell about that road, but never been over it. In short, he was strictly non-committal. Haley, accustomed to strike the balance of probabilities between lies of greater or lesser magnitude, thought that it lay in favor of the dirt road aforesaid. The mention of the thing he thought he perceived was involuntary on Sam's part at first, and his confused attempts to dissuade him he set down to a desperate lying on second thoughts, as being unwilling to implicate Liza. When, therefore, Sam indicated the road, Haley plunged briskly into it, followed by Sam and Andy. Now, the road, in fact, was an old one, that had formerly been a thoroughfare to the river, but abandoned for many years after the laying of the new pike. It was open for about an hour's ride, and after that it was cut across by various farms and fences. Sam knew this fact perfectly well indeed. The road had been so long closed up, that Andy had never heard of it. He therefore rode along with an air of dutiful submission, only groaning and vociferating occasionally that tea was desp rough, and bad for Jerry's foot. "Now, I jest give yer warning," said Haley, "I know yer won't get me to turn off this road, with all yer fussin' so you should up." "Moss R. will go his own way," said Sam, with rueful submission, at the same time winking most portentously to Andy, whose delight was now very near the explosive point. Sam was in wonderful spirits, professed to keep a very brisk lookout at one time, exclaiming that he saw a gal's bonnet on the top of some distant eminence, or calling to Andy if that there wasn't Lizzie down in the hollow, always making these exclamations in some rough or craggy part of the road, where the sudden quickening of speed was a special inconvenience to all parties concerned, and thus keeping Haley in a state of constant commotion. After riding about an hour in this way, the whole party made a precipitate and tumultuous descent into a barnyard belonging to a large farming establishment. Not a soul was in sight, all the hands being employed in the fields, but, as the barn stood conspicuously and plainly square across the road, it was evident that their journey in that direction had reached a decided finale. "Wanty dat are what I tellied Moss are," said Sam, with an air of injured innocence. "How does strange gentlemen spect to know more about a country dan de natives born and raised?" "You rascal," said Haley, "you knew all about this." "Didn't I tell yer I knowed, and yer wouldn't believe me? I tellied Moss RT was all shit up, and fenced up, and I didn't spect we could get through, and he heard me. It was all too true to be disputed, and the unlucky man had to pocket his wrath with the best grace he was able, and all three faced to the right about, and took up their line of march for the highway. In consequence of all the various delays, it was about 3/4 of an hour after Eliza had laid her child to sleep in the village tavern that the party came riding into the same place. Eliza was standing by the window, looking out in another direction, when Sam's quick eye caught a glimpse of her. Haley and Andy were 2 yards behind. At this crisis, Sam contrived to have his hat blown off, and uttered a loud and characteristic ejaculation, which startled her at once. She drew suddenly back, the whole train swept by the window, round to the front door. 1,000 lives seemed to be concentrated in that one moment to Eliza. Her room opened by a side door to the river. She caught her child, and sprang down the steps towards it. The trader caught a full glimpse of her just as she was disappearing down the bank, and throwing himself from his horse, and calling loudly on Sam and Andy, he was after her like a hound after a deer. In that dizzy moment her feet to her scarce seemed to touch the ground, and a moment brought her to the water's edge. Right on behind they came, and, nerved with strength such as God gives only to the desperate, with one wild cry and flying leap, she vaulted sheer over the turbid current by the shore, onto the raft of ice beyond. It was a desperate leap impossible to anything but madness and despair, and Haley, Sam, and Andy, instinctively cried out, and lifted up their hands, as she did it. The huge green fragment of ice on which she alighted pitched and creaked as her weight came on it, but she stayed there not a moment. With wild cries and desperate energy she leaped to another and still another cake, stumbling, leaping, slipping, springing upwards again. Her shoes are gone, her stockings cut from her feet, while blood marked every step, but she saw nothing, felt nothing, till dimly, as in a dream, she saw the Ohio side, and a man helping her up the bank. "You're a brave gal, now, whoever ye are," said the man, with an oath. Eliza recognized the voice and face for a man who owned a farm not far from her old home. "Oh, Mr. Sims, save me, do hide me," said Eliza. "Why, what's this?" said the man. "Why, if Tanty Shelby's gal. My child, this boy, he'd sold him. There is his Moss R," said she, pointing to the Kentucky shore. "Oh, Mr. Sims, you've got a little boy." "So I have," said the man, as he roughly, but kindly, drew her up the steep bank. "Besides, you're a right brave gal. I like grit, wherever I see it." When they had gained the top of the bank, the man paused. "I'd be glad to do something for ye," said he, "but then there's no war I could take yet. The best I can do is to tell ye to go thar," said he, pointing to a large white house which stood by itself, off the main street of the village. "Go thar, they're kind folks. Thar's no kind o' danger, but they'll help you, they're up to all that sort o' thing." "The Lord bless you," said Eliza, earnestly. No 'casion in the world," said the man. What I've done's of no count. And, oh, surely, sir, you won't tell anyone. Go to thunder, gal. What do you take a feller for? In course not, said the man. Come, now, go along like a likely, sensible gal, as you are. You've earned your liberty, and you shall have it, for all me. The woman folded her child to her bosom, and walked firmly and swiftly away. The man stood and looked after her. Shelby, now, mebbe won't think this you're the most neighborly thing in the world, but what's a feller to do? If he catches one of my gals in the same fix, he's welcome to pay back. Somehow I never could see no kind o' critter a strivin' and pantin', and trying to clar theirs elves, with the dog's arter and go agin 'em. Besides, I don't see no kind of 'casion for me to be hunter and catcher for other folks, neither. So spoke this poor, heathenish Kentuckian, who had not been instructed in his constitutional relations, and consequently was betrayed into acting in a sort of Christianized manner, which, if he had been better situated and more enlightened, he would not have been left to do. Haley had stood a perfectly amazed spectator of the scene, till Eliza had disappeared up the bank, when he turned a blank, inquiring look on Sam and Andy. That AR was a tolerable fair stroke of business, said Sam. The gal-'s got 7 devils in her, I believe, said Haley. How like a wildcat she jumped. Wall, now, said Sam, scratching his head, I hope Ma Sar'll 'scuse us trying dat AR road. Don't think I feel spry enough for dat AR, no way, and Sam gave a hoarse chuckle. You laugh, said the trader, with a growl. Lord bless you, Moss R, I couldn't help it now, said Sam, giving way to the long pent-up delight of his soul. She looked so curries, a leapin' and sprin' ice a crackin' and only to hear her plump, ker-chunk, ker-splash. Spring. Lord. How she goes it, and Sam and Andy laughed till the tears rolled down their cheeks. I'll make ya laugh t' other side your mouths, said the trader, laying about their heads with his riding whip. Both ducked, and ran shouting up the bank, and were on their horses before he was up. Good evening, Moss R, said Sam, with much gravity. I very much spect Mrs. be anxious 'bout Jerry. Moss R Haley won't want us no longer. Mrs. wouldn't hear of our ridin' the critters over Lizzie's bridge tonight, and, with a facetious poke into Andy's ribs, he started off, followed by the latter, at full speed, their shouts of laughter coming faintly on the wind. Chapter 8. Eliza's escape. Eliza made her desperate retreat across the river just in the dusk of twilight. The grey mist of evening, rising slowly from the river, enveloped her as she disappeared up the bank, and the swollen current and floundering masses of ice presented a hopeless barrier between her and her pursuer. Haley therefore slowly and discontentedly returned to the little tavern, to ponder further what was to be done. The woman opened to him the door of a little parlor, covered with a rag carpet, where stood a table with a very shining black oilcloth, sundry lank, high-backed wood chairs, with some plaster images in resplendent colors on the mantel shelf. Above a very dimly smoking grate, a long hardwood settle extended its uneasy length by the chimney, and here Haley sat him down to meditate on the instability of human hopes and happiness in general. What did I want with the little cuss, now, he said to himself, that I should have got myself treed like a coon, as I am, this your way, and Haley relieved himself by repeating over a not very select litany of imprecations on himself, which, though there was the best possible reason to consider them as true, we shall, as a matter of taste, omit. He was startled by the loud and dissonant voice of a man who was apparently dismounting at the door. He hurried to the window. By the land, if this here ain't the nearest, now, to what I've heard folks call Providence, said Haley. I do believe that AR's Tom Loker. Haley hastened out. Standing by the bar, in the corner of the room, was a brawny, muscular man, full 6 feet in height, and broad in proportion. He was dressed in a coat of buffalo skin, made with the hair outward, which gave him a shaggy and fierce appearance, perfectly in keeping with the whole air of his physiognomy. In the head and face every organ and lineament expressive of brutal and unhesitating violence was in a state of the highest possible development. Indeed, could our readers fancy a bulldog come unto man's estate, and walking about in a hat and coat, they would have no unapt idea of the general style and effect of his physique. He was accompanied by a traveling companion, in many respects an exact contrast to himself. He was short and slender, lithe and cat-like in his motions, and had a peering, mousing expression about his keen black eyes, with which every feature of his face seemed sharpened into sympathy. His thin, long nose ran out as if it was eager to bore into the nature of things in general. His sleek, thin, black hair was stuck eagerly forward, and all his motions and evolutions expressed a dry, cautious acuteness. The great man poured out a big tumbler half full of raw spirits, and gulped it down without a word. The little man stood tiptoe, and putting his head first to one side and then the other, and snuffing considerately in the directions of the various bottles, ordered at last a mint julep, in a thin and quivering voice, and with an air of great circumspection. When poured out, he took it and looked at it with a sharp, complacent air, like a man who thinks he has done about the right thing, and hit the nail on the head, and proceeded to dispose of it in short and well-advised sips. "Wall, now, who'd a thought this your luck 'ad come to me?" "Why, Loker, how are ye?" said Haley, coming forward, and extending his hand to the big man. "The devil," was the civil reply. "What brought you here, Haley?" The mousing man, who bore the name of Marks, instantly stopped his sipping, and, poking his head forward, looked shrewdly on the new acquaintance, as a cat sometimes looks at a moving dry leaf, or some other possible object of pursuit. "I say, Tom, this year's the luckiest thing in the world. I'm in a devil of a hobble, and you must help me out." "Ugh, like enough," grunted his complacent acquaintance. "A body may be pretty sure of that, when you're glad to see something to be made off of What's the blow now?" "You've got a friend here," said Haley, looking doubtfully at Marks. "Partner, perhaps?" "Yes, I have. Here, Marks. Here's that AR feller that I was in with in Natchez." "Shall be pleased with his acquaintance," said Marks, thrusting out a long, thin hand, like a raven's claw. "Mr. Haley, I believe." "The same, sir," said Haley. "And now, gentlemen, seein' as we've met so happily, I think I'll stand up to a small matter of a treat in this here parlor. So, now, old coon," said he to the man at the bar, "get us hot water and sugar and cigars, and plenty of the real stuff, and we'll have a blowout." Behold, then, the candles lighted, the fire stimulated to the burning point in the grate, and our three worthies seated round a table, well spread with all the accessories to good fellowship enumerated before. Haley began a pathetic recital of his peculiar troubles. Loker shut up his mouth, and listened to him with gruff and surly attention. Marks, who was anxiously and with much fidgeting compounding a tumbler of punch to his own peculiar taste, occasionally looked up from his employment, and, poking his sharp nose and chin almost into Haley's face, gave the most earnest heed to the whole narrative. The conclusion of it appeared to amuse him extremely, for he shook his shoulders and sides in silence, and perked up his thin lips with an air of great internal enjoyment. "So, then, ye are fairly sewed up, and ye," he said, he. "It's neatly done, too. This here young un business makes lots of trouble in the trade," said Haley, dolefully. "If we could get a breed of gals that didn't care, now, for their young uns," said Marks, "tell ye, I think 't would be 'bout the greatest modern improvement I knows on," and Marks patronized his joke by a quiet introductory sniggle. "Jes' so," said Haley, "I never couldn't see into it. Young uns is heaps of trouble to one would think, now, they'd be glad to get clar on but they aren't. And the more trouble a young un is, and the more good for nothing, as a gen thing, the tighter they sticks to Wall, Mr. Haley, said Marks, just pass the hot water. Yes, sir, you say just what I feel and all us have. Now, I bought a gal once, when I was in the trade a tight, likely wench she was, too, and quite considerable smart, and she had a young un that was missable sickly, it had a crooked back, or something or other, and I just gin tea away to a man that thought he'd take his chance raising on tea, being it didn't cost nothin', never thought, yer know, of the gals talking on about it, but, Lord, yer oughter seen how she went on. Why, really, she did seem to me to vally the child more cause he was sickly and cross, and plagued her, and she warn't making believe, neither cried about it, she did, and lopped round, as if she'd lost every friend she had. It really was droll to think on Lord, there ain't no end to women's notions. Wall, jest so with me, said Haley. Last summer, down on Red River, I got a gal traded off on me, with a likely lookin' child enough, and his eyes looked as bright as yourn, but, come to look, I found him stone blind. Fact he was stone blind. Wall, yes'ee, I thought there warn't no harm in my jest passing him along, and not sayin' nothin', and I'd got him nicely swapped off for a keg o' whiskey, but come to get him away from the gal, she was jest like a tiger. So was before we started, and I hadn't got my gang chained up, so what should she do but ups on a cotton bale, like a cat, catches a knife from one of the deck hands, and, I tell ye, she made all fly for a minute, till she saw warn't no use, and she jest turns round, and pitches head first, young un and all, into the river, went down plump, and never ris. Bah, said Tom Loker, who had listened to these stories with ill-repressed disgust, shiftless, both on ye, my gals don't cut up no such shines, I tell ye. Indeed, how do you help it, said Marks, briskly. Help it, why, I buys a gal, and if she's got a young un to be sold, I jest walks up and puts my fist to her face, and says, look here, now, if you give me one word out of your head, I'll smash your face in. I won't hear one word, not the beginning of a word. I says to this here young un's mine, and not yourn, and you've no kind o' business with it. I'm going to sell it, first chance, mind, you don't cut up none o' your shines about it, or I'll make ye wish ye'd never been born. I tell ye, they sees it and no play, when I gets hold. I makes as whist as fishes, and if one on begins and gives a yelp, why, and Mr. Loker brought down his fist with a thump that fully explained the hiatus. That ar's what ye may call emphasis, said Marks, poking Haley in the side, and going into another small giggle. And Tom peculiar, he. I say, Tom, I expect you make understand, for all niggers' heads is woolly. They don't never have no doubt o' your meaning, Tom. If you ain't the devil, Tom, you-'s his twin brother, I'll say that for ye. Tom received the compliment with becoming modesty, and began to look as affable as was consistent, as John Bunyan says, with his doggish nature. Haley, who had been imbibing very freely of the staple of the evening, began to feel a sensible elevation and enlargement of his moral faculties, a phenomenon not unusual with gentlemen of a serious and reflective turn, under similar circumstances. Wall, now, Tom, he said, ye really is too bad, as I allies have told ye know, Tom, you and I used to talk over these yer matters down in Natchez, and I used to prove to ye that we made full as much, and was as well off for this yer world, by treatin' on well, besides keepin' a better chance for comin' in the kingdom at last, when wust comes to wust, and there ain't nothing else left to get, ye know. Bo, said Tom, don't I know, don't make me too sick with any yer stuff, my stomach is a leetle riled now, and Tom drank half a glass of raw brandy. I say, said Haley, and leaning back in his chair and gesturing impressively, I'll say this now, I allies meant to drive my trade so as to make money on first and foremost, as much as any man, but, then, trade and everything, and money and everything, cause we all got souls. I don't care, now, who hears me say it, and I think a cussed sight on it, so I may as well come out with it. I believe in religion, and one of these days, when I've got matters tight and snug, I calculates to tend to my soul and them AR matters, and so what's the use of doing any more wickedness than really necessary? It don't seem to me it's all prudent. Tend to your soul, repeated Tom, contemptuously. Take a bright look out to find a soul in you, save yourself any care on that score. If the devil sifts you through a hair sieve, he won't find one. Why, Tom, you're cross, said Haley. Why can't ye take it pleasant, now, when a feller's talking for your good? Stop that jaw o' yourn, there, said Tom, gruffly. I can stand most any talk o' yourn, but your pious talk that kills me right up. After all, what's the odds between me and you? Tanty that you care one bit more, or have a bit more feelin' it's clean, sheer, dog meanness, wanting to cheat the devil and save your own skin, don't I see through it? And you're gettin' religion, as you call it, arter all, is too pison mean for any critter, run up a bill with the devil all your life, and then sneak out when pay time comes. Bob. Come, gentlemen, I say, this isn't business, said Marks. There's different ways, you know, of looking at all subjects. Mr. Haley is a very nice man, no doubt, and has his own conscience, and, Tom, you have your ways, and very good ones, too, Tom, but quarreling, you know, won't answer no kind of purpose. Let's go to business. Now, Mr. Haley, what is it, you want us to undertake to catch this here gal? The gal's no matter of mine, she's Shelby's, it's only the boy. I was a fool for buying the monkey. You're generally a fool, said Tom, gruffly. Come, now, Loker, none of your huffs, said Marks, licking his lips. You see, Mr. Haley sa puttin' us in a way of a good job, I reckon. Just hold still, these yer arrangements is my forte. This yer gal, Mr. Haley, how is she? What is she? Wall, white and handsome, well brought up. I'd a gin shall be 800 or 1,000, and then made well on her. White and handsome, well brought up, said Marks, his sharp eyes, nose, and mouth, all alive with enterprise. Look here, now, Loker, a beautiful opening. We'll do a business here on our own account, we does the catchin', the boy, of course, goes to Mr. Haley, we takes the gal to Orleans to speculate on. And it beautiful. Tom, whose great heavy mouth had stood ajar during this communication, now suddenly snapped it together, as a big dog closes on a piece of meat, and seemed to be digesting the idea at his leisure. Yes see, said Marks to Haley, stirring his punch as he did so, yes see, we has justices convenient at all piants along shore, that does up any little jobs in our line quite reasonable. Tom, he does the knockin' down and that and I come in all dressed up, shining boots, everything first chop, when the swearin' to be done. You oughter see, now, said Marks, in a glow of professional pride, how I can tone it off. One day, I'm Mr. Twickham, from New Orleans, 'nother day, I'm just come from my plantation on Pearl River, where I work 700 niggers, then, again, I come out a distant relation of Henry Clay, or some old cock in Kentuck. Talents is different, you know. Now, Tom's roarer when there's any thumping or fighting to be done, but at lying he ain't good, Tom ain't. Yes see, it don't come natural to him, but, Lord, if thar's a feller in the country that can swear to anything and everything, and put in all the circumstances and flourishes with a long face, and carry tea through better 'an I can, why, I'd like to see him, that's all. I believe my heart, I could get along and snake through, even if justices were more particular than they is. Sometimes I rather wish they was more particular, tea would be a heap more relishin' if they was more fun, yer know. Tom Loker, who, as we have made it appear, was a man of slow thoughts and movements, here interrupted Marks by bringing his heavy fist down on the table, so as to make all ring again. It'll do, he said. Lord bless ye, Tom, ye needn't break all the glasses, said Marks, save your fist for time o' need. But, gentlemen, and I to come in for a share of the profits, said Haley. And it enough we catch the boy for ye, said Loker. What do ye want? Wall, said Haley, if I gives you the job, it's worth something say 10% on the profits, expenses paid. Now, said Loker, with a tremendous oath, and striking the table with his heavy fist, don't I know you, Dan Haley? Don't you think to come it over me? Suppose Marks and I have taken up the catchin' trade, jest to commodate gentlemen like you, and get nothin' for ourselves, not by a long chalk. We'll have the gal out, and you keep quiet, or, yes see, we'll have both. What's to hinder? Haunty, you showed us the game. It's as free to us as you, I hope. If you or Shelby wants to chase us, look where the partridges was last year. If you find them or us, you're quite welcome. Oh, Wall, certainly, just let it go at that, said Haley, alarmed. You catch the boy for the job, you allers did trade far with me, Tom, and was up to your word. Ye know that, said Tom, I don't pretend none of your snivelling ways, but I won't lie in my counts with the devil himself. What I'll do, I will do, you know that, Dan Haley. Just so I said so, Tom, said Haley, and if you'd only promise to have the boy for me in a week, at any point you'll name, that's all I want. But it ain't all I want, by a long jump, said Tom. Ye don't think I did business with you, down in Natchez, for nothing, Haley. I've learned to hold an eel, when I catch him. You've got to fork over $50, flat down, or this child don't start a peg. I know you're. Why, when you have a job in hand that may bring a clean profit of somewhere about 1,000 or 1,600, why, Tom, you're unreasonable, said Haley. Yes, and hasn't we business booked for 5 weeks to come all we can do? And suppose we leaves all, and goes to bushwhacking round arter your young uns, and finally doesn't catch the gal, and gals allers is the devil to catch, what's then? Would you pay us a cent, would you? I think I see you a-doin' it, ugh. No, flap down your 50. If we get the job, and it pays, I'll hand it back. If we don't, it's for our trouble that's far, and it, Marks. Certainly, said Marks, with a conciliatory tone, it's only a retaining fee, you see. We lawyers, you know. Wall, we must all keep good-natured, keep easy, yer know. Tom'll have the boy for yer, anywhere ye'll name, won't ye, Tom? If I find the young un, I'll bring him on to Cincinnati, and leave him at Granny Belcher's, on the landing, said Loker. Marks had got from his pocket a greasy pocket book, and taking a long paper from thence, he sat down, and fixing his keen black eyes on it, began mumbling over its contents. Barnes, Shelby County boy Jim, $300 for him, dead or alive. Edward Stick and Lucy man and wife, $600, wench Polly and 2 children, $600 for her or her head. I'm jest a-runnin' over our business, to see if we can take up this year handily. Loker, he said, after a pause, we must set Adams and Springer on the track of these year, they been booked some time. They'll charge too much, said Tom. I'll manage that, they's young in the business, and must 'spect to work cheap, said Marks, as he continued to read. There's 3 on 'em easy cases, 'cause all you've got to do is to shoot 'em, or swear they is shot. They couldn't, of course, charge much for that. Them other cases, he said, folding the paper, will bear puttin' off a spell. So now let's come to the particulars. Now, Mr. Haley, you saw this here gal when she landed? To be sure, plain as I see you. And a man helpin' on her up the bank, said Loker. To be sure, I did. Most likely, said Marks, she's took in somewhere, but where, 's a question. Tom, what do you say? We must cross the river tonight, no mistake, said Tom. But there's no boat about, said Marks. The ice is running awfully, Tom, and it dangerous. Don know nothing bout that, only it's got to be done, said Tom, decidedly. Dear me, said Marks, fidgeting, it'll be, I say, he said, walking to the window, it's dark as a wolf's mouth, and, Tom. The long and short is, you're scared, Marks, but I can't help that you've got to go. Suppose you want to lie by a day or two, till the gal's been carried on the underground line up to Sandusky or so, before you start. Oh, no, I ain't a grain afraid, said Marks, only. Only what, said Tom. Well, about the boat. Yer see there ain't any boat. I heard the woman say there was one coming along this evening, and that a man was going to cross over in it. Neck or nothing, we must go with him, said Tom. I suppose you've got good dogs, said Haley. First rate, said Marks. But what's the use, you hain't got nothin' o' hers to smell on. Yes, I have, said Haley, triumphantly. Here's her shawl she left on the bed in her hurry, she left her bonnet, too. That ar's lucky, said Loker, fork over. Though the dogs might damage the gal, if they come on her unawares, said Haley. That ar's a consideration, said Marks. Our dogs tore a feller half to pieces, once, down in Mobile, 'fore we could get 'em off. Well, yes see, for this sort that's to be sold for their looks, that ar won't answer, yes see, said Haley. I do see, said Marks. Besides, if she's got took in, tan't no go, neither. Dogs is no count in these yer upstates where these critters gets carried, of course, ya can't get on their track. They only does down in plantations, where niggers, when they runs, has to do their own running, and don't get no help. Well, said Loker, who had just stepped out to the bar to make some inquiries, they say the man's come with the boat, so, Marks. That worthy cast a rueful look at the comfortable quarters he was leaving, but slowly rose to obey. After exchanging a few words of further arrangement, Haley, with visible reluctance, handed over the $50 to Tom, and the worthy trio separated for the night. If any of our refined and Christian readers object to the society into which the scene introduces them, let us beg them to begin and conquer their prejudices in time. The catching business, we beg to remind them, is rising to the dignity of a lawful and patriotic profession. If all the broad land between the Mississippi and the Pacific becomes one great market for bodies and souls, and human property retains the locomotive tendencies of this 19th century, the trader and catcher may yet be among our aristocracy. While this scene was going on at the tavern, Sam and Andy, in a state of high felicitation, pursued their way home. Sam was in the highest possible feather, and expressed his exultation by all sorts of supernatural howls and ejaculations, by divers odd motions and contortions of his whole system. Sometimes he would sit backward, with his face to the horse's tail and sides, and then, with a whoop and a somerset, come right side up in his place again, and, drawing on a grave face, begin to lecture Andy in high-sounding tones for laughing and playing the fool. Anon, slapping his sides with his arms, he would burst forth in peals of laughter, that made the old woods ring as they passed. With all these evolutions, he contrived to keep the horses up to the top of their speed, until, between 10 and 11, their heels resounded on the gravel at the end of the balcony. Mrs. Shelby flew to the railings. "Is that you, Sam? Where are they? Moss are Haley sa restin' at the tavern, he's drefful fatigued, Mrs. And Eliza, Sam? Wall, she's clar cross Jordan. As a body may say, in the land o' Canaan." "Why, Sam, what do you mean?" said Mrs. Shelby, breathless, and almost faint, as the possible meaning of these words came over her. "Wall, Mrs., de Lord he preserves his own. Lizzie's done gone over the river into Hio, as markably as if the Lord took her over in a chariot of fire and 2 horses. Sam's vein of piety was always uncommonly fervent in his mistress' presence, and he made great capital of scriptural figures and images. "Come up here, Sam," said Mr. Shelby, who had followed onto the veranda, "and tell your mistress what she wants." "Come, come, Emily," said he, passing his arm round her, "you are cold and all in a shiver, you allow yourself to feel too much." "Feel too much? Am not I a woman, a mother? Are we not both responsible to God for this poor girl? My God! Lay not this sin to our charge." "What sin, Emily? You see yourself that we have only done what we were obliged to." "There's an awful feeling of guilt about it, though," said Mrs. Shelby. "I can't reason it away." "Here, Andy, you nigger, be alive," called Sam, under the veranda, "take these your hosses to der barn, don't yet hear Moss or a callin'," and Sam soon appeared, palm leaf in hand, at the parlor door. "Now, Sam, tell us distinctly how the matter was," said Mr. Shelby. "Where is Eliza, if you know?" "Wall, Moss R, I saw her, with my own eyes, a-crossin' on the floatin' ice. She crossed most markably, it wasn't no less nor a miracle, and I saw a man help her up the high-o side, and then she was lost in the dusk." "Sam, I think this rather apocryphal, this miracle. Crossing on floating ice isn't so easily done," said Mr. Shelby. "Easy, couldn't nobody a done it, without the Lord." "Why, now," said Sam, "'t was just dis your way. Moss R. Haley, and me, and Andy, we comes up to de little tavern by the river, and I rides a leetle ahead, I's so zealous to be a cotchin' Lizzie, that I couldn't hold in, no way, and when I comes by the tavern winder, sure enough there she was, right in plain sight, and dey diggin' on behind. Wall, I loses off my hat, and sings out 'nuff to raise the dead. Course Lizzie she hars, and she dodges back, when Moss R. Haley he goes past the door, and then, I tell ye, she cleared out the side door, she went down de river bank, Moss R. Haley he seed her, and yelled out, and him, and me, and Andy, we took arter. Down she come to the river, and there was the current running 10 feet wide by the shore, and over t other side ice a sawin and a jiggling up and down, kinder as t were a great island. We come right behind her, and I thought my soul he'd got her sure enough when she gin sich a screech as I never hearn, and there she was, clar over t other side of the current, on the ice, and then on she went, a screeching and a jumpin' the ice went crack. See wallop. Cracking. Chunk. And she a-boundin' like a buck. Lord, the spring that ar gal's got in her ain't common, I'm opinion." Mrs. Shelby sat perfectly silent, pale with excitement, while Sam told his story. "God be praised, she isn't dead," she said, "but where is the poor child now?" "The Lord will provide," said Sam, rolling up his eyes piously. "As I been a-sayin', dis yer a providence and no mistake, as Mrs. has allers been a-instructin' on us. Dar's allers instruments is up to do de Lord's will. Now, if t hadn't been for me today, she'd a been took a dozen times. Warn't it I started off de hosses, dis yer mornin' and kept chasin' till nigh dinner time. And didn't I car Moss R. Haley night 5 miles out of de road, dis evening, or else he'd a come up with Lizzie as easy as a dog arter a coon. These yer all providences. They are a kind of providences that you'll have to be pretty sparing of, Master Sam." "I allow no such practices with gentlemen on my place," said Mr. Shelby, with as much sternness as he could command, under the circumstances. "Now, there is no more use in making believe be angry with a Negro than with a child, both instinctively see the true state of the case, through all attempts to effect the contrary, and Sam was in no wise disheartened by this rebuke, though he assumed an air of doleful gravity, and stood with the corners of his mouth lowered in most penitential style. "Moss are quite right, quite, it was ugly on me, there's no disputin' that ar, and of course Moss R and Mrs. wouldn't encourage no such works. I'm sensible of dat ar, but a poor nigger like me s mays and tempted to act ugly sometimes, when fellers will cut up such shines as dat ar Moss R Haley, he ain't no gen l man no way, anybody's been raised as I been can't help a seein' dat ar. Well, Sam, said Mrs. Shelby, as you appear to have a proper sense of your errors, you may go now and tell Aunt Chloe she may get you some of that cold ham that was left of dinner today. You and Andy must be hungry. Mrs. is a heap too good for us, said Sam, making his bow with alacrity, and departing. It will be perceived, as has been before intimated, that Master Sam had a native talent that might, undoubtedly, have raised him to eminence in political life, a talent of making capital out of everything that turned up, to be invested for his own especial praise and glory, and having done up his piety and humility, as he trusted, to the satisfaction of the parlor, he clapped his palm leaf on his head, with a sort of rakish, free and easy air, and proceeded to the dominions of Aunt Chloe, with the intention of flourishing largely in the kitchen. I'll speechify these your niggers, said Sam to himself, now I've got a chance. Lord, I'll reel it off to make 'em stare. It must be observed that one of Sam's especial delights had been to ride in attendance on his master to all kinds of political gatherings, where, roosted on some rail fence, or perched aloft in some tree, he would sit watching the orators, with the greatest apparent gusto, and then, descending among the various brethren of his own color, assembled on the same errand, he would edify and delight them with the most ludicrous burlesques and imitations, all delivered with the most imperturbable earnestness and solemnity, and though the auditors immediately about him were generally of his own color, it not infrequently happened that they were fringed pretty deeply with those of a fairer complexion, who listened, laughing and winking, to Sam's great self-congratulation. In fact, Sam considered oratory as his vocation, and never let slip an opportunity of magnifying his office. Now, between Sam and Aunt Chloe there had existed, from ancient times, a sort of chronic feud, or rather a decided coolness, but, as Sam was meditating something in the provision department, as the necessary and obvious foundation of his operations, he determined, on the present occasion, to be eminently conciliatory, for he well knew that although Mrs. Orders would undoubtedly be followed to the letter, yet he should gain a considerable deal by enlisting the spirit also. He therefore appeared before Aunt Chloe with a touchingly subdued, resigned expression, like one who has suffered immeasurable hardships in behalf of a persecuted fellow creature, enlarged upon the fact that Mrs. had directed him to come to Aunt Chloe for whatever might be wanting to make up the balance in his solids and fluids, and thus unequivocally acknowledged her right and supremacy in the cooking department, and all thereto pertaining. The thing took accordingly. No poor, simple, virtuous body was ever cajoled by the attentions of an electioneering politician with more ease than Aunt Chloe was won over by Master Sam's suavities, and if he had been the prodigal son himself, he could not have been overwhelmed with more maternal bountifulness, and he soon found himself seated, happy and glorious, over a large tin pan, containing a sort of oleopodrada of all that had appeared on the table for 2 or 3 days past. Savory morsels of ham, golden blocks of corn cake, fragments of pie of every conceivable mathematical figure, chicken wings, gizzards, and drumsticks, all appeared in picturesque confusion, and Sam, as monarch of all he surveyed, sat with his palm leaf cocked rejoicingly to one side, and patronizing Andy at his right hand. The kitchen was full of all his compeers, who had hurried and crowded in, from the various cabins, to hear the termination of the day's exploits. Now was Sam's hour of glory. The story of the day was rehearsed, with all kinds of ornament and varnishing which might be necessary to heighten its effect, for Sam, like some of our fashionable dilettanti, never allowed a story to lose any of its gilding by passing through his hands. Roars of laughter attended the narration, and were taken up and prolonged by all the smaller fry, who were lying, in any quantity, about on the floor, or perched in every corner. In the height of the uproar and laughter, Sam, however, preserved an immovable gravity, only from time to time rolling his eyes up, and giving his auditors divers inexpressibly droll glances, without departing from the sententious elevation of his oratory. "Yer see, fellow countrymen," said Sam, elevating a turkey's leg, with energy, "yer see, now what dis yer chilly s up ter, for fendin' yer all yes, all on yer. For him as tries to get one o' our people is as good as tryin' to get all, yer see the principle est de same dat ars clar. And any one o' these yer drivers that come smelling round arter any our people, why, he's got me in his way, I'm the feller he's got to set in with, I'm the feller for yer all to come to, brethren, I'll stand up for yer rights, I'll fend 'em to the last breath." "Why, but Sam, yer tellied me, only this mornin', that you'd help this yer moss or to cotch Lizzie, seems to me your talk don't hang together," said Andy. "I tell you now, Andy," said Sam, with awful superiority, "don't yer be a talkin' 'bout what yer don't know nothin' on. Boys like you, Andy, means well, but they can't be 'spected to collucidate the great principles of action." Andy looked rebuked, particularly by the hard word collucidate, which most of the youngerly members of the company seemed to consider as a settler in the case, while Sam proceeded. "Dat ar was conscience, Andy, when I thought of gwine arter Lizzie, I ralely 'spected Moss ar was sot dat way. When I found Mrs. was sot the contrar, dat ar was conscience more yet, cause fellers allers gets more by stickin' to Mrs. side, so yer see I is persistent either way, and sticks up to conscience, and holds on to principles." "Yes, principles," said Sam, giving an enthusiastic toss to a chicken's neck. "What's principles good for, if we isn't persistent, I want ter know? Dar, Andy, you may have dat ar bone tanty picked quite clean." Sam's audience hanging on his words with open mouth, he could not but proceed. "Dis yer matter 'bout persistence, feller niggers," said Sam, with the air of one entering into an abstruse subject, "dis yer sistency s a thing what ant seed into very clar, by most anybody. Now, yer see, when a feller stands up for a thing one day and night, de contrar de next, folks ses, and nat rally enough day ses, why he ant persistent. Hand me dat ar bit o corn cake, Andy. But let's look inter it. I hope the gentleman and der fair sex will scuse my usin' an ornary sort o' parison. Here. I'm a trying to get top o' der hay. Wall, I puts up my larder dis yer side, tanty no go, den, cause I don't try dear no more, but puts my larder right de contrar side, and I persistent? I'm persistent in wantin' to get up which airy side my larder is, don't you see, all on yer. It's the only thing ya ever was persistent in, Lord knows," muttered Aunt Chloe, who was getting rather restive, the merriment of the evening being to her somewhat after the scripture comparison like vinegar upon nitre. "Yes, indeed," said Sam, rising, full of supper and glory, for a closing effort. "Yes, my feller citizens and ladies of de other sex in general, I has principles I'm proud to un they s perquisite to dese your times, and ter all times. I has principles, and I sticks to like 40 jest anything that I thinks is principle, I goes into tea. I wouldn't mind if dey burnt me live, I'd walk right up to de stake, I would, and say, here I comes to shed my last blood for my principles, for my country, for de gen interests of society." "Well," said Aunt Chloe, "one o' your principles will have to be to get to bed some time tonight, and not be a keepin' everybody up till mornin'. Now, every one of you young uns that don't want to be cracked, had better be scase, mighty sudden." "Niggers, all on yer," said Sam, waving his palm leaf with Benny goodnighty, "I give yer my blessin', go to bed now, and be good boys." And, with this pathetic benediction, the assembly dispersed.